Good evening and welcome to Squirm Night, a 2018 election forum brought to you by Grassroots TV, Aspen Public Radio, Aspen Daily News, and the Aspen Times. I am Curtis Wackerly, editor of the Aspen Times, and with me is David Kraus, editor of the Aspen Times. Did I say the Aspen Times too many times?
We have two people from the Aspen Times.
So nice. He said
Aspen Daily News. Aspen Daily News. We're starting off the evening with the candidates for Pitkin County Sheriff, featuring Aspen Police Officer Walter Chi and incumbent Joe DeSalvo. Both are longtime law enforcement hands in this community. DeSalvo was first elected sheriff in 2010. And previously had served as undersheriff and as a deputy, going all the way back into the 80s, I believe.
Yes, sir.
Walter Chi has been with the Aspen Police Department for 26 years and is making your first run for elected office.
That's great.
Gentlemen, welcome to you both.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us, guys. Our first question will go to the challenger, Walter. In 2 minutes or less, please tell us what you see as the top thing that needs to change at the sheriff's office. And do you take issue with any of Joe's style?
I would say for the first thing is staffing. I think right now, very short-handed in a couple of positions, both patrol and in the jail. I think that needs to be an immediate change within the sheriff's department. If I could say that a word that I didn't coin, which is internal customer service, I think it needs to be there. I think those people do a wonderful job for us. They work very hard. They deal with the front line of problems, and I think they deserve our respect. The job is very honorable. It needs respect, and that's the one thing, the most important thing I think that I would say needs to change right now in the sheriff's department.
Joe, as a follow-up, I'm sorry, Walter, did you have something else to say?
Yeah, well, you asked the secondary question, which was, do I have a problem with Joe's style? There is a problem a little bit with Joe's style. I think there is a concern that his treatment of some of his people are different than some of the other people, and I would like to see that change.
Joe, as a follow-up, what do you see as your top accomplishments in the past 8 years?
Wow, there's a lot of them, David. One of the things I'm most proud of over 8 years was when I took office. We didn't have a great relationship outside Pitkin County, and as I said, I climbed almost every rung in the ladder of the sheriff's office. I started out as a patrol officer, then I became an investigator, and I was head of investigations, then supervisor, and then I went to undersheriff and then elected sheriff. So over that period of time, I watched the sheriff's office evolve. And one of the things that I saw that really we didn't evolve enough at was making relationships with neighboring counties and neighboring sheriff's offices. So one of the things I'm proudest of is I've established a great relationship with Sheriff Valerio in Garfield County, Sheriff Van Beek in Eagle County. Our Lake County Sheriff and I are very close. So I started that first, and then I decided, which Sheriff Broadus did not do, was have relationships with sheriffs statewide. So I took a proactive role in our state association, County Sheriffs of Colorado. And I became a board member there 2 years ago. And this gives me access to sheriffs statewide that have much more toys than we have, much more staff than I have, training opportunities that I've never been exposed to. So that's one of the things I'm proudest of. I'm very proud of one of the laws that we had passed. I never helped make a law before. I didn't even know how they were made. And we decided to change the law on trucks on Independence Pass. And with that, I went to the Capitol with John Peacock and Senator Schwartz, and we sat there and I learned how a law was made. And then I sat on the floor and I watched the law take shape and get put on the books. And I thought that was kind of a highlight of my career. I never thought I'd be able to tell my parents that, you know, your son had a say in a law that got passed. And I think it's an important one for us. Oversized trucks on Independence Pass is a real safety hazard, and that's kind of at the top of my list. So the short answer is I think I'm real proud of the relationships I've developed statewide, and I think you see that in some of the letters to the editor in the last few weeks of sheriffs from big counties that have 300 and 400 officers that now I could connect with, and if we need help, it's there for us.
Next question is for you, Sheriff DeSalvo. Your agency is responsible for patrolling the far reaches of Pitkin County 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Is there adequate law enforcement coverage in areas like Redstone and Meredith? And as a secondary to that question is, how is one deputy on patrol in the graveyard shift hours adequate?
Well, first of all, when it comes to Redstone, I have a deputy that lives in Marble. And she moved there, I think about a year ago. And she has access to those residents. She's become a local up there. In the past, the county had a house up there. And we have, usually we're able to give somebody housing and have them be on call in Redstone. But that's not the case anymore. But I have Monique who lives up there. I have a regular patrol schedule at least 3 days a week. We are in Redstone. I was at the Redstone caucus meeting last month, and I'm there probably twice a year, keeping in touch with them to make sure that we are providing them the service that they want. As far as Thomasville goes, I have to say this respectfully to the people that live up there. They are quite happy with the, 2 or 3 times a week they see us up there. I mean, I think they really believe in less is more up there. As far as the second part of your question, Curtis, I think, one deputy, my shift ends at 3 o'clock, so from 3 to 7 we have one deputy on. That's not uncommon for rural policing. Routt County, Grand County, these counties that are very large in square miles but only have one deputy on. I would say, it's a hard question for me to answer because I don't want to give away that there's other departments that have 1 or 0 police on from 3 to 7 o'clock. So I would say that I'm not the only department here with just 1 person on between 3 and 7. And when we do our hiring, we ask people very upfront, are you okay with being in the middle of Highway 82, 20 miles from help, and maybe doing a car stop on your own? As I said, it's not uncommon to have 1 officer on between 3 and 7, and there's other departments in this valley that have the same thing. It is a byproduct of being in a rural, small county sheriff's office.
And Walter, you have spoken directly to this issue and said you think there ought to be more patrol resources in those hours. How will you make that work operationally? Do you plan to hire more deputies? Do you have to increase the sheriff's office budget? How would you make that work?
That's a great question. I think the sheriff's department needs some more people. There's been, in the last several years, no requests for any full-time equivalent additions, except for in the jail positions. They're upping those numbers. But I would say that they do probably need a little bit more of their adjustment in their schedule. The police department where I work, we have a early and a late shift, and our schedule does go till 3:30, and we find that we're busy from those last hours of 2 to 3:30, and we're not the last line of defense when people are driving home. We're out there, as I think I've even said, if you pass the gauntlet of getting out of Aspen and you're intoxicated, people feel like they're free and clear. And I think that staying after, for another 15 minutes after the bars close, people feel like, there's only one out there that I can get by. So I think that changing the schedule, adjusting times of start and stop, my approach will be to be in a patrol car. Myself, if I'm on a day shift, I don't think it's appropriate to have an unmarked patrol sergeant or an unmarked sheriff's car that's not being used for the potential of going to calls. I really enjoy the law enforcement part of it, so for me to continue that, I will.
I need to correct something. In the 8 years I've been sheriff, we increased our patrol staff by 2 and our jail staff by 2. This year I have requested for another. When you understand county budgeting, it's pretty austere. And each officer is approximately $120,000 plus for us to start them. So I just can't snap my fingers and get 3 cops at $360K. That's a big impact to our budget. So I think that's inexperience of knowing budgeting and staffing and what the real county requirements are.
But could you not change the schedule, Joe? Have you looked at changing the schedule? Have you thought about that?
We do have the same early-late shift that Walter's talking about, but it still only leaves 1 person on. Walter's not telling us that the Aspen Police Department as well, and I'll let him talk about staffing for them, has a similar problem.
Good. Let's go back to Joe. Under your watch, the Pitkin County Alert Notification System has improved and has grown in its use and in importance. You've also used it, Joe, to send out press releases promoting your charity golf tournament, which I have played in. full disclosure. How is that an appropriate use of public resources to promote a golf tournament with alerts?
I think it's totally appropriate. If you look at Pitkin Alert, and I hope you all sign up for it, please. It is the best way for us to get you information from anything to a flood to a golf tournament. So if you look at all the check boxes there are ones for traffic, weather, criminal activity, and there's a special event box. This is a special event. It's no different than Food and Wine or X Games. We send out X Games notices all the time through Pitkin Alert. So I don't think it's any different. I do think it's a community event. It's one that I'm very proud of, and I don't think there was anything inappropriate using the system to notify the residents of a special event. And I got to tell you, I think it's a good use. We raised $140,000 this year for our vets, and in the past we've done a lot of work for the Hope Center. So I don't think it's inappropriate at all. Oh, wow. Thank you.
What's your handicap, Joe?
The one I tell my friends, or what's really listed? 13. 13 is my handicap.
I've been wondering that.
Walter, in the September 30 Aspen Daily News story, which cataloged some of your concerns with the Sheriff's Office, DeSalvo noted that in your long history as colleagues, you had never come to him and raised some of your concerns directly. I wonder why not?
Well, I would start with when Joe was running for sheriff several times, you know, both the times that he has run. He hasn't really come out and asked me. You know, if I were a community police person, I would want that. I would want the person that's running for office to come to me and say, hey, what do you think? I have talked to Joe in positions of whether or not we should have our department separated. I'm very vocal about that. I put up the article in 2013, I think it was the Times, when it said sheriff suggests the police move out of the courthouse. And Joe called me into his office and said, hey, we need to have a talk. And I said, well, okay. And couldn't just talk one-on-one. He had to have someone else there with him. And I felt like I didn't really have the freedom to say. He wanted to give me his opinion about it, and that was all. So I think that Joe's closed that off for me. And I don't feel like I've gotten an answer and been able to express myself freely to him.
Do you have a response to that?
I guess I do. You know, especially when it comes to our new building, I think both of you, maybe David wasn't here yet, we're familiar with all the public meetings and outreach we've had. I've not seen Walter at a single public outreach. I've not, you know, I don't recall specifically what he's talking about, but I will tell you one thing. When you come to my office, it's usually a setting of there's more than one person with me. I like the interaction I have with my staff. I'm collaborative. But that aside, he's never been to a single public meeting for any county project, and I think it's really easy now that that building is built and we put the last brick in, we've moved in, and our pencils are at our desk, David, and to criticize that. But I've never seen Walter at a single public meeting, and God knows we had plenty of them.
This next question is for you, Joe. In the past 2 years, there have been incidents at the jail, including inmates found to be having sex, illegal use of a cell phone, drugs that were smuggled in. You have been quoted in response to some of these incidents saying that you were embarrassed and that we, quote, need to do a better job. You've also said you did not reprimand any deputies in response to these incidents. Why not?
Well, let me go back to, excuse me one second. First, I'm still embarrassed, and I'm still unhappy about it. And we've made some changes, and I think it was changes that needed to come. Most sheriffs, and I will admit this, most sheriffs are disconnected with their jail. Most sheriffs come up through the ranks of patrol officers, not in a jail environment. So the majority of us, the 64 in Colorado and the 3,000 nationally, don't really have the experience in jails that we should have when we first start. I'm reluctant to burn anybody on my staff, but we've made changes. With staff, I brought in a new jail commander. Her name is Kim Valario. She was the jail administrator at Garfield County. It's a 200-person facility. I brought in, as soon as this happened, I brought in 2 deputies from other counties who did a jail assessment. We didn't do well. And we're making some changes, and if I had more than 30 minutes, I would go into all of them. But I think you should know I'm taking responsibility for that. Curtis, one of the biggest problems I have right now, and Walter may have if he becomes sheriff, is our physical plant, which is the jail, is now 32 years old. We need to make changes. I can't cohabitate men and women anymore like we've been doing. I need a segregated section for women, which we don't have. I need a segregated section for the mentally ill so they're not vulnerable in my population. There are some things that are occurring. The sex in the jail, for example, and I'm going to be wide open about it, was a product of our physical plant and men and women congregating in the same place together. That has to change. And we've done that now. Everything that was the byproduct of that very embarrassing situation, I think, has been rectified. We are making a lot of progress in the jail, and I wish I had more time, because I would tell you that it's anything from we've eliminated contact visits. A lot of things that we did in the jail were the way we did them 30 years ago. That's unacceptable. We had to keep moving. And I think in the last year we have made a lot of progress in the jail, and I'm going to credit a lot of that with the jail assessment that we had and hiring a new jail administrator. Walter's right, we are making a lot of staff changes in the jail, and that is going to be one of my priorities in the next 4 years, which I could talk about later if you'd like.
Walter, go ahead.
Can I just reply to that? I think, you know, I got to watch Joe's Probe Line interview the other night, and I really was listening to him talk about how proud he was of him being on the forefront of the APRIA program, which I know was prior to this. And yet, in the middle of that, the Prison Rape Association rules that, or Prison Rape Act that he was on the forefront of, didn't even affect that. And I think that that's, to me, a real bad situation. I don't
understand what you mean didn't affect that. For those who don't know, Walter's talking about the Prison Rape Elimination Act. I was very proud that Pitkin County was chosen to be a test site for that. We have people that are in jail that are getting sexually assaulted every day, and no one cares. They say, oh, they're just inmates, they deserve to be treated this way. So we were part of a pilot program that we're on for 2 years that brought this to our attention. The fact that 2 inmates had sex was not related to the Prison Rape Elimination Act. We did have to report it as such, and we investigated it as such, but it was something that, you know, as I said, I'm taking responsibility for it. It slipped by us. We did everything we could post. It was not a violent situation. It was a consensual situation. But we did report it through PRIA.
Walter, did you want to follow up?
Well, I would say I think that the problem in that situation is when you have a female in the jail or a male in the jail that could be under some duress or anything, I don't think you can even say that it wasn't or potentially wasn't a forceful or a violent act.
I'm not going to disagree, but it won't happen again.
I'm glad to hear that.
Walter, this next question is for you. In an Aspen Times story on October 3rd, it was noted that you were recently under investigation by the District Attorney's Office for potentially not reporting an incident of alleged sexual assault on a child. The investigation concluded that the statute of limitations had expired, but there was probable cause to believe you failed to make a report mandated by state law. In the article, you claimed you were not informed of the sexual nature of the crime by the alleged victim's grandmother, who sought your advice. But even if there was no mention of sexual assault, do you still feel personally obligated to report a crime involving any kind of violence or abuse, especially on a child?
Oh, absolutely. I think, number one, if I can use Joe's words, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed that if something bad happened to that person and I didn't take part to change it. But I do take sexual assault very seriously. And when I investigate it, the main thing that I try to do is re-empower people. The person we're talking about called me 2 days ago for advice. Mm-hmm. I don't think that they're trying to say I did anything wrong. I think this situation has not allowed me to put myself out there, answer any questions. I think it was very blatant for the Sheriff's Department to take it on as a crime when they, a 30-some-year-old veteran of the Sheriff's Department, along with his juvenile detective, knew it was beyond its statute of limitations. It'd be like me saying, hey, you know, I know Joe committed a crime back in the 70s. Let me turn that over to the district attorney's office. I'll tell you what happened, and you can make a judgment on it. And they're going to come back with the same judgment. If what I said was true, you're guilty. But we're not going to file anything. We're not going to allow you to, answer the question or be transparent about what you did. I feel like that for me, is that article didn't allow me to get my side of that story out in a court of law or in a situation where I could, other than just tell my side. And I think I tried to do that. I do apologize to that family. I've apologized to them directly because, as I said, if I'd have known it was more important, I would have. And I know the rules of mandatory reporting.
Joe, follow up.
Can I respond to that, please?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, David.
Yep.
What Walter did was there's no excuse for it, inexcusable. In Walter's statement, he said he told her there'd probably be an investigation that would go through Riverbridge. Riverbridge does one thing, investigate child sex. If he didn't know it was about sex, why would he bring up Riverbridge? A. B. These cases you're seeing come to fruition today in the paper. A lot of these cases are going to be prosecuted. And I think Walter will have some questions he needs to answer about why he didn't report this. Lastly, as far as the statute of limitations go, we weren't sure when this started. There was legislation that was in front of the judiciary this year to change this law that says we don't care when you heard about it. It's when the person reports it when your mandatory clock starts to tick. So we didn't know. This all came about 2.5 years later, or 2 years later, when this woman reported it through another agency that had a mandatory reporting policy.
Right.
So she knew to mandatorily report it to us. You're going to see these cases and many others involving the people that Walter talked to come to fruition in a prosecution now. And I don't know what could have been prevented 2 years ago if Walter had done his duty. But I'm finding it real hard to swallow that he'd take a defensive nature on that. An apology, I think, would be a great way to start this off. But the statute of limitations and anyone who thinks that this was political or a plant needs to come talk to me, because I think you're naive to think you would run for a position like this and not have yourself fully vetted. Anything from whether you were in a bar fight or whether you didn't pay your taxes or whether you sexually assaulted somebody when you were 15 years old. Our newspapers, as you guys know, job is to dig and scratch. And when you put your name on that ballot, you are open for a public colonoscopy, if you will, and this is part of it. They dug and they found something. And that's what happens when you put your name on the ballot.
To your point, though, I believe, Walter, you did apologize, right? You said you apologized to the family, and you said you were embarrassed. So I think to that point, that's accepted. Joe, follow up to this. Have you or the DA's office now talked to Walter about this case and got to that point when he said you guys had not even talked to him this summer about the investigation that was going on?
Stepping on someone else's toes, because I can't sit here and not tell the truth to you, David. The minute we found out, we told Walter's, the administration of the Aspen Police Department, left it to their hands to talk to Walter, left it to them whether they were going to discipline him or not. I don't know that that's my job to talk to Walter about a case that we clearly can't prosecute, but I think that question goes to the administration. In late June, when we found out about this, or July, I forget which one, we immediately called the administration of the Aspen Police Department.
Have you been reprimanded by your superiors?
No. I've been talked to, but I would like to also say that I don't know why in this scenario the information was let out at the time it was, even in I would say, something that should have been a little bit more protected on an active case, that the party on the other side now has retained an attorney based on the article in the paper. And
there's an experience again. If we have a closed case, it belongs to you guys. It's public information. It's out there. Whether it involves a police officer or not, Walter, those are public records once we close them, and I think you should, as more than these guys, be familiar with that. When a reporter comes in and asks for everything with Walter Chee's name on him, we give it to him.
Walter, we're narrowing in on our time that we had allotted. So
No problem.
I think one question that we probably wanted to get to for sure was you voiced support for bringing drug-sniffing dogs into the high school to combat teen substance abuse. Why do you think that is a good idea, and how would you address the concerns that this is an inappropriate way to police our children?
Well, part of the thing I think that Joe doesn't understand is I'm a parent. Joe's not a parent. I've raised 2 kids in this valley. They've been through the Aspen schools. I talk to a lot of teachers. I talk to parents. I was the school resource officer at the Aspen High School. I've done exactly the kind of things that Joe says brought him to the point of being sheriff, which is start in a patrol position, be a trainer. I've been a school resource officer, which I don't think Joe has, but I've run through investigations, and then now in an assistant patrol supervisor position. There's not any difference between the two of us. I'm moving to that point of being in management, and the position that I think Joe's talking about here as the sheriff here to make some of those decisions is my move upward. Having these kids concerned about drugs, concerned about sex that's going on at the school, I want to provide the school with as many things as I can that will help them in their process of eliminating some of those risks to those teenagers. I'm not looking for, and I had made it very clear in the article to the Daily News, was I didn't want it to become an issue that increased the prosecution of juveniles. What I want is the school teachers to be able to teach. I discussed it with the reporter. I said, hey, it's hard enough for me on the streets to go out there and see somebody that's maybe smoking pot through a vape pen or through, you know, something that you can smoke regular things through and it's been flavored and smells. It's hard to see those things. So what I want to do is give them a tool to eliminate that risk at the school. So being a parent, raising kids in this community, listening to other parents, I think they really feel like that school needs that prevention and not to increase juvenile prosecution.
Can I respond to that, please, David or
Sure.
Curtis? First of all, another example of Walter not coming. I understand if Walter thinks I have a closed door, that's his prerogative. We have 3 school resources officers, 2 that belong to me and 1 that's part of his department. I've never heard him bring any of these concerns to those people. As far as the dogs go, let me talk to the community about this. I think dogs are an extreme response to an extreme problem. I meet with school administrators regularly, as does Richard Pryor. And at this time, they've given me no indication that there's an extreme drug problem at our school. There also seems to be absolutely no desire on the part of school administrators, the school board, or parents to have drugs or dogs in the school. These are decisions they make. If they come to me and say, Sheriff, we think we have a problem, I'll collaborate with them and get them a drug dog and help work with them and help implement the program. I've heard nothing from the administrators I meet with almost monthly. So until that happens, I'll keep business as usual with my 2 school resource officers in the school and 1 from the Aspen Police Department. But once again, I think going to a school and forcing a value that's not theirs is irresponsible.
Can I quick reply to something?
Quick reply.
I think the school has a responsibility. The standard that they have is to be the parents when I'm not there with my child. And I think if he understood that, he would know that that's one of the things that they should be doing. And that
Well, take that up with the school, Walter, not with the sheriff's office. I mean, if you don't think the school's doing its job, take it up with them.
Hey, Joe, I really don't want to interrupt you, but what I would say is this. I want to look forward to things in the future that could be better for our community, not necessarily back. And I think we're that organization that should be enforcing the rules, not worrying about, you know, who provides it, whether they asked for it or not.
We were close to running out of time here, but before we go, you each have the opportunity to ask each other a question. Walter, please go first.
Well, I guess since the drug dog question went away, I guess I would like to ask why you don't think there should be more prevention of issues like drugs in the school or anything that increases that safety level at the school?
I never said I didn't.
Okay.
That's a simple question answer.
Okay.
All right then. Joe, it's your turn.
I think I'd like to ask Walter a question of, Walter, tell us about your firsthand experience in the following areas. Management of a $7 million budget, management of a jail that holds 20 inmates, management of a communication center, management of a staff of 60 people, managing a volunteer organization of such as Mountain Rescue, and your experience in government contracts with such as Wildfire, Forest Service, and what's the just other things relating to the U.S. government?
Well, I guess the way I would answer that is, as I said before, I'm coming up through the same ranks as Joe did. I think it's something that you do have to learn. I think utilizing Pitkin County government is also a big thing. John Peacock, the finance department of the county. There are super experienced people within the sheriff's department, and accepting that on as a responsibility or a task that I need to learn. Myself, I have been a manager at a station in Michigan. I worked for the airline and customer service. I have a degree in aviation management. I think that's how I would bring up how I can change that department, and I think moving in there as part of a team, I can do that.
Thank you. All right, we are about to the end. We told the candidates they could each have 2 minutes to give their platform or a closing statement. Since Walter, you got to go first with the first question, Joe, we'll let you go first with your 2-minute closing statement, please, and then Walter can follow.
Thanks, David. First of all, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate the support. And thanks, David and Curtis and the Daily News and the Times for putting this on, and Grassroots TV for helping us out, and to all of you at home, thank you. I'm very lucky and proud to have served this community for the last 32 years and the last 8 as sheriff. I'm very proud of my tradition and my DNA that runs through my veins and the legacy that I represent. I started my career as a patrol officer and climbed every rung in this organization, from patrol to investigations to supervision to investigator, and then eventually undersheriff. I'm without question the most experienced person for this job. My team and I have accomplished many things over the last 8 years, and there's much more to do. I never forget who my boss is. It's 18,000 residents of Pitkin County and the visitors that come here every year. They are who I work for. I take that very seriously. I work for you, and I represent, and I never forget that. I'm grateful for the last 8 years, and I look forward to 8 more. So on November 6th, I ask for 2 things. Please vote for me, and please support the Healthy Community Fund. It's a very important issue that we have in front of us, probably more important than this race itself. And I really don't think the people of Pitkin County can afford to train a new sheriff on their watch. So please vote for me, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Joe. Walter, you get the last word.
No worries. Thanks. I would also like to thank you guys for coming and inviting me to this forum. I'd like to thank all the people that came, Grassroots. You guys are doing a great job of getting the information out, and I would say that I love this community as much as Joe does. I think that what we're talking about here is fundamental differences, and I think that as a truly one of the first legitimate candidates to run against the regime that he talks about and that DNA that has caused problems for this community in allowing some drug issues, some mental health issues, and some other problems that we've come along with. I would like to see that change, and I hope that the community here sees that my part of it is going to be to try and change those things. I'd like to invest in the community and invest my time, help out with mental health, help out with the suicide problems, the child alcohol, the child drug use, things of that nature. They're all things that I think I can make a better stand than Joe does at it, instead of supporting the industry that's tourism now in our area, trying to be the policing of it, which is what I think law enforcement is supposed to do.
Thanks, Walter. Thanks, guys.
Thank you guys for joining us. We're going to come back with our next set of Squirm questions for the assessor candidates. We'll be joined by Deb and Mick here in a few minutes. And please remember that the ballots will go out in the mail October 15th next week. You should get them in the mail. Early voting starts October 22nd at the new county courthouse, new county building, and election day is November 6th. So give us a few minutes and we'll be back with our assessor version of Squirm Night. Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Squirm Night, a 2018 election event brought to you by Grassroots TV, Aspen Public Radio, the Aspen Daily News, the Aspen Times. I'm David Krause, editor of the Aspen Times, and with me is Curtis Wackerly, editor of the Aspen Daily News. We are continuing the first evening of Squirm Night with the race for Pitkin County Assessor. Joining us are Deb Bamesberger and Mick Ireland. Deb has been in real estate for 25 years and currently works in the assessor's office. She is seeking to replace her boss, Tom Isaac, who is retiring. Mick is a longtime local with a background in tax law and has served as a Pitkin County Commissioner and also as Mayor of Aspen. Deb and Mick, thank you for joining us tonight. Appreciate it.
Our first question is for Deb. You have worked in the assessor's office for 6 years, and the department gets good reviews for customer service. What's the biggest problem that needs to be improved?
The biggest problem that needs to be improved in the office is our lack of software ability. There's a program out there that will integrate with our current software, which is a top of the line for all government agencies, especially assessors' offices. But this program would add a 3D feature to it, and I would like to get it incorporated in the Sheriff's Office, 911, and Community Development, Zoning and Planning. It could be beneficial to all departments because it shows you an aerial shot, 3D view with measurements, and it would integrate with our current software.
Okay, Mick, as a follow-up, you have also spoken about the need for better software in the assessor's office and also better office hours for people in areas of the county not named Aspen. What is the cost behind these proposals? How would you pay for them?
Well, they don't cost very much at all. Software is expensive, but we need software now, not hypothetically, that communicates with basic programs like Excel. Right now, if you're an assessor, if you're an appraiser, you're working on basically what amounts to sort of a K-Pro computer system where you have to do a lot of data entry. They shouldn't be doing that. The skill positions should be able to capture data the first time and not have to enter it by hand. As for office hours, that would not be very expensive because appraisers, all of our appraisers live outside the county down valley. So if they went over to the Eagle County building to Redstone, it's not a long trip. In fact, it's less of a trip than they make every day to come to work. The job itself is data-based. It's computer-oriented. You can bring a laptop, and you should be, in my view, able to bring up all the information about a piece of property on a single screen. As it is now, you can't. One of the taxpayers called me and asked me how his property came to be what it was in valuation. I had to go to 4 different websites to bring together the data to respond to him. There's a website that shows the land use rules, and there's another website that shows the underlying plat, and yet another that shows the history of the property, and there is no website that shows the properties to which a person's property is compared for valuation. All that should be in one place. If it were, you could sit down with an appraiser and the assessor, if it were myself, and tell the property owner, here's how we got there, and here's the information, and here's how you can check it for yourself. The assessor database sounds large because it has 15,000 properties, but it's not unmanageable. I have all the properties in Pitkin County on a spreadsheet. It's public data, and I've got it for 3 different years, and I've used it to do research. But it ought to be so that the ordinary, well, in Aspen, Pitkin County, you don't have ordinary person, but you don't have anyone who's ordinary. But a taxpayer ought to be able to go there to one screen and say, who am I being compared to? What's the underlying plat map? What's the history on this property? And why are things the way, what kind of notes have been taken on my property?
What will the software cost?
You know, I don't know. I'm not a software developer. I have had a pretty big role in creating design dimensions for software. I'm familiar with, I use some fairly sophisticated software in my home office like ArcView GIS, so I already do some of this work at home, but I'm not a software developer and I can't tell you how much that would cost. But the value to citizens of being able to access their data on their own is incalculable. And it shouldn't be put off, well, I don't know how much it'll cost. I think it's affordable. Software is actually going down in cost every 18 months. The capacity for chips doubles, and that's still going on. So I don't think it's that expensive. I know there was a time when what we do on our phone took an entire room this size with air conditioning to compute.
Deb, you work in the assessor's office. Just to follow up, have you heard a cost, what you talked about? Have you heard a number bantied around in the office on making a big software change?
Our current software, which is very intelligent and highly sophisticated, is about $136,000 a year. To do what Mick's talking about would probably cost another $100,000 to integrate into the current system, and our budget won't let that happen.
Do you think $100,000 is not that much to improve a system?
It is about what it costs, yes, but it's not part of our budget, and it would be something we'd have to take in front of the commissioners and see if they would allow another $100,000 to come into our budget.
Would you see value in that, I guess, is the question I'm trying to get to.
Definitely.
Okay.
It would be a very good system to have.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, Mick, you've got a strong background in education and tax issues, but there seems to be in this area a never Mick crowd because of your past approach to constituents and policy positions. How do you get over that?
Well, the job of the assessor is not political. We don't make policy decisions. We don't decide that your property tax is going to be higher because I don't like you, or yours are going to be lower because I do. We can't do that. The valuation of property is governed by this manual, which I've reproduced here. It's almost 400 pages. And it is subject, if I overvalued your property in some political plot, you would have an appeal to the office, to a hearing officer. If the hearing officer denied it, to the Colorado Board of Equalization acting as the county commissioners, or the other way around. And from there, if they deny you, if the commissioners deny you, you can go to the BAA, you can go to arbitration, and you can go to district court and beyond. So there are a lot of checks to keep anybody from abusing the position one way or another. And finally, the state audits your results. There was an assessor years ago who thought second homes were driving up values and locals needed a break, and she wanted to lower the value for local properties. The state audited that. It came back and said, you've undervalued properties, and it came in and revalued all the Pitkin County properties, and then billed Pitkin County for $92,000 to reassess property. The assessor, if I were elected, or Deb, does not do appraisals. We're not an appraiser. I'm not a certified appraiser, although I intend to take the courses. I actually kind of look forward to them. There's lots of cool math in there in this book I've looked through. We don't appraise property. So it's a question of whether or not you can do the job, apply the facts and the law to an individual case. And that's what lawyers are trained to do. That's what you do when you're dealing with the IRS and you're representing a taxpayer, which I've done. So, you know, yeah, people don't like your decisions. They don't like affordable housing. They don't like trails. They may not like the bus system. I supported these things. I still do. But you cannot base your vote for assessor on somebody's vote on a transportation initiative. I think that's unrealistic. It's inappropriate. And it's not the job.
Thank you. Deb, as a follow-up to that, you kind of get the benefit of that never Mick crowd, but what is your education and background that makes you more qualified than Mick? We looked through your website, and there's very little listed in terms of education and background, and your on the issues section seems to be blank. Isn't that an important part of your campaign message for people who don't know you, is where you stand either on the issues or your background more than being state certified and going to continuing education classes?
Okay, that's 3 or 4 questions, but the first question is my education and background. I went to accounting school, college, and then I started working as the first woman lineman in the state of Colorado for 12 years. Then I got my real estate license and I worked in real estate. I also was an escrow officer for Pitkin County Title for about 7 years. I did about $30 million worth of closings per week. And I've been with the assessor's office about 6.5 years. I have a master's in real estate, and all the real estate background, the degrees and whatever, they're not really relevant to being an assessor. Working in the assessor's office for the last 6.5 years and taking the state statute classes and learning everything about the assessor's office and how to do what I do is what makes me more experienced.
How did you, what drew you to the assessor's office 6.5 years ago?
The recession really kind of burst my bubble with real estate, and I lost 16 closings in 2009, and I just really didn't want to go back into that. I wanted to do something in the real estate field, but that's either real estate or title work, and I didn't want to go back into title work either, so I saw the opening at the assessor's office, so I applied for it.
Thank you.
Why is the on the issues section of your website blank?
I don't really have any issues regarding the assessor's office. There really aren't issues. It's not, like Mick said, it's not a political office. There really aren't many issues.
Okay.
Mick, you've stated that you would consider an amendment to the state constitution allowing second homeowners to be taxed at a higher rate.
No, I didn't say that. I said I would consider that, but I didn't say that I would support that.
You said you would consider it.
Yeah, if somebody brought it to us. I don't think that's going to happen, and here's why. The current law, as it applies, requires all property, whether it's your fifth home, your second home, or your tiny home, to be valued according to market principles, and I think that's fair. I don't support the idea of taxing second homes at a higher rate or a lower rate. I think it should all be the same. If somebody wants to, bring that to us and say this is necessary, in some states they do that, but here you would have to have a constitutional amendment, and I don't think that's appropriate. I just simply don't.
You don't think it's appropriate to have a different assessment for properties that are investments
no,
that sit empty?
No. I don't think so, because right now the situation is such that it's so complicated. Every time you change the Constitution to meet some special need or interest group, you wind up with a Tabor Act or a Gallagher Act, and Gallagher has hurt our school systems, hurt our fire department. So the complexity of that and the attempt, furthermore, to ascertain whether or not a property is actually occupied or is a, quote, second home, very difficult. We already have a problem in this community with people who say, well, I'm voting here, but I live most of the time in California. And trying to unravel that and being a police agency to discover what is really a second home would, I think, be intrusive. And furthermore, it's complicated by the fact that my research on the public database shows that much of your property now, especially residential property, is owned by entities, REMICs, trusts, LLCs, corporations, sub-S's, all kinds of living trusts. Those properties, you can't find out who really owns it. So if you can't find out who owns it, how are you going to tell whether it's really a second home or it's just a person who says, well, I'm here. I own a 32% interest in this LLC, so therefore I'm a local resident. I think it's a can of worms I don't want to open. There are other things to be done, but that one I don't think is very useful.
Deb, as a follow-up, what's your position on how the assessor's office ought to treat this issue with dealing with second homes and vacation properties?
We are totally against it. The state of Colorado is against it because, as he said, it's not fair and equitable. You have to be fair and equitable.
Okay, thank you.
Deb, Mick brought up the Gallagher Amendment, and we wanted to kind of touch on that because it is so complicated. And it has been in the news a lot in this election season with the pending negative effects on many special districts. What's your take on Gallagher, and does it need to be changed? How could it be changed, and if so, why?
It's working right now. If this Amendment 73 goes through, or whatever it's called, number 73, it's going to really affect the special districts, especially because we're going to have to have two separate taxing on the schools, and it's going to be a mess.
So how do you avoid that, or if that comes into play and you become the assessor, how do you deal with that?
We have to deal with it. The state of Colorado will implement it, and then our software company will put their thing. We'll have to redo all the taxes for everybody. It'll be a lot.
I'm sorry, Deb.
Sure.
Mick, as a tax attorney and someone who was in Colorado right back in the early 80s when Gallagher was amended, how do you see that amendment's legacy?
It's a mixed blessing. One thing in the Gallagher Amendment does is it requires all property to be valued by, all residential property to be valued by market comparisons. And I think that's a fair standard. It doesn't always result in a perfect valuation, but it's a good standard and it's objective. It doesn't result in people getting favors because, you know, a wink and a nod. I'm from Chicago and that's how they did it there. And I'm proud of the fact we don't do it that way here. On the other hand, Gallagher has really hurt rural Colorado. Really hurt Garfield, Montrose, Mesa, Montezuma, Dolores, La Plata, Alamos, dozens of counties, and here's why. The Gallagher Amendment forces the multiplier by which your valuation is determined for tax purposes to go down each year because the property value in the Front Range is growing so rapidly. And that means that the actual revenue available to a school district in, say, Archuleta County or Garfield County is declining. And so we have kids in schools in the San Luis Valley who are losing weight. Now, how are these related? As Gallagher forces the revenue down, these school districts have to go to a 4-day school week. We see that in Garfield County, and we see that down in the San Luis Valley and Rio Blanco, all over the state. The kids in places where the median income is close to the minimum wage, or the Aspen mayor's salary, something like that, as those places go from 5 days a week to 4 days a week, the kids there are getting 8 instead of 10 federal meals. They're losing weight. That's a tragic consequence. So Gallagher is hurting special districts and school systems. The Assessors Association is considering 3 different solutions from modification to abolition of Gallagher. I think you have to move carefully on this because you'd have to build a broad consensus around the reform so that you could get the necessary supermajority from the voters and the necessary signatures from all 35 Senate districts. So it's a complex issue, but it's a mixed blessing. It does provide fairness, and there are historical reasons for that we don't have time to explain, and it does hurt rural Colorado and school districts where they don't have commercial property to provide a revenue base. Delta, for example.
Thank you.
The next question is for Deb. The Aspen Daily News on September 21 reported on your history of tax trouble, including late property tax payments and liens due to problems with federal income tax. In the article, you stated that, quote, "I've been a slacker when it comes to paying my own taxes on time, and I'm good with money, just not my own." What would you say to Pitkin County taxpayers who are hesitant to vote for you because of those statements and the history?
Right. Chad kind of blindsided me with that. I wasn't prepared at all to answer his questions. And those 2 comments I made, I was nervous as he was asking me these questions, and I kind of just blurted out. And what I meant to say was, I was a very successful real estate broker, and I was paying tens of thousands of dollars every year in taxes for my income. In 2009, when the bottom fell out of everything and all my closings fell apart, I had already paid our 2008 taxes, and the IRS audited us. And after 3 days, they found that my husband had income in his checking account that he hadn't disclosed. I am not a CPA or an accountant. I would simply collect his information. He worked from home, and I would deliver it to our tax preparer. And at that point, when the audit was done, we owed, and because we filed jointly, and I, for the record, stopped filing jointly after that. I started filing married, filing separately. But the point is, the taxes were owed at that point. I didn't have any more money coming in, so I did about every small job that I could find because there were no jobs open, and he wasn't working very much. There just wasn't much going on. And so I was making small payments on it, but the small payments were actually less than the interest and penalties that were accruing, and it just snowballed. And as far as the property taxes went, because we were fighting so hard just to live and keep food on the table, I kept pushing the property taxes back, and then finally I'd go, I gotta pay these. And so they would be late every year. And that happened for 3 or 4 years. And I finally sought legal help, and we took care of everything. It's all paid off, it's over, and I'm a stronger person because of it, because it was very tough.
Mick, you've been doing a lot of different things here in Aspen for over 40 years. Would you stop moonlighting as a political consultant and a tax attorney? And are you prepared for a full-time government job? And a small follow-up to that was, when was the last time you had a full-time 9-to-5 job?
Well, I wish that I'd had a 40-hour work week most of the time I've been here. Like most people in Aspen, I don't have a single job. I've had 2 or 3. So I've worked since the day I got here. In fact, I've worked since I was 7 years old. I first started paying taxes when I was 7. My grandmother let me do the math. My grandfather had died, and they brought me downtown to a very large restaurant, seat 300 people, Ireland's Oyster House, Inc., and I was the cashier. And the first time I got paid, it was $1 an hour, 8 hours, and I got the paycheck and it was $6.96. I could do the math. Where's my other $1.04, Dad? Taxes, son. And I've been paying taxes since then. As to government full-time job, I've never had an administrative job. I was a mayor, I was a county commissioner, and those were often more than full-time jobs, so I'm ready for that aspect of it. Maybe there was another portion there. Oh, I would recuse myself at the assessor's office from any client that I had, current or recent past client, so I wouldn't consider their appeal or their property tax situation. I'd simply step aside if I had a client. I do have a wife now. My wife is trying to start a business in Aspen. That's very difficult. This job would represent probably a decline in my income, a cut in pay. I don't know whether I would be able to give up all of that, but I would certainly recuse myself from any current or future client. I have a small practice, not that many clients, so I don't think it's a major problem, and I don't see any conflicts. I would certainly consult with the county attorney on it as to whether any particular client would be considered a conflict.
Thank you.
We're close to running out of time, but before we go, you each have the opportunity to ask each other a question. Deb, please go first.
Oh, my goodness. Why do you want to be the assessor, Mick?
A couple of reasons. I was asked. I've been a hearing officer for more than a decade, and that means I've heard taxpayers come in and say their property was valued too highly. And sometimes they're right. And it's not because the appraisers are corrupt or mistaken or inept, but because an appraiser in an office with 15,000 properties and 5 people on the appraiser staff can't know all the circumstances of your property. I helped rewrite the Pitkin County Land Use Code that they still use when I was a commissioner. I initiated a rezoning ordinance for downtown Aspen before Ref 1, and I think my familiarity with land use code decisions and their application gives me an advantage that an appraiser isn't trained for. So that if somebody comes in and says, why is my house valued higher than my neighbor's house, even though we're identical in size and same neighborhood and all that? And often it has to do with the fact that their zoning rights, the right to future development, is greater on identical looking pieces of property. And if you understand that, and I have had an opportunity to learn that, that's an asset that I bring to this office. So as an appraiser, I think I could bring this off. I could bring needed change to this office. I want to honor Tommy Isaacs. Tommy Isaac, 28 years of service as an assessor, 4 years in city government, so 32 years. I want to honor that, but I think it's time for some change. It's time to look forward, to bring in some more technical expertise, to make things more transparent for the taxpayer, to make things more efficient for the people that work there. And I think I can do this, and I think it's an opportunity to serve and continue public service that I've done all my life.
Thank you, and Mick, please ask the question of Deb.
You know, I think I understand Deb's positions, and I don't really have any questions. I would yield the time to her if she wants to speak additionally and has something that she left out she'd like to add.
Well, if that's the case, then we'll move on because we do have 2-minute closing statements for both of you to kind of make your platform. Mick, we'll let you have the floor first.
Okay. We call my campaign, my website, Let Mick Do the Math. And we do that because that's been my lifetime experience since I was 7. People were letting me do the math when I was in school. People would come to me with their math problems. One of my friends, who today has a doctorate in communication services and IT, used to come to me to let me do his programming. And I told him, this is fun. You can get a lot out of this. You just do the program. just help me. He called me up years later and he said, you're right, it is fun. And now he's a doctorate in IT. I enjoy working with the application of law to facts. I enjoy working with the mathematical implications of property valuation. I have with me here one of the papers I wrote based on that valuation. Rural Tourism and Second Home Development, the Case of Colorado. I co-wrote this paper. I like the work. I like working with people, but I really like working with numbers as well. And I think I have a combination of talents, that is, experience with a lot of software, how to apply it. I'm not a code writer, and I have a lot of experience with how this community works, how land use works here, and what affects it. So I think I could do a good job. I think I have the qualifications. I think 10 years as a hearing officer, tax emphasis degree from the University of Colorado. I think those are assets that could be put to work for this community, and I'd be happy to have your vote on November 6th. So I hope people let Mick do the math.
Yeah. Thank you, Mick. Deb?
Well, I moved to this valley in 1979 because it's such a beautiful place, and I raised my 3 kids here. They all graduated from our schools. I love working at the assessor's office. I love helping people. It's my passion to serve the taxpayers of Pitkin County. I love helping them understand the process. I do a lot of math. The Pitkin County's value is over $33 billion, and I work with Debbie, the admin deputy, on the abstract certification every year. And we have to balance to the penny every class code that there is and deliver that to the state. I also help prepare the tax roll to deliver to the treasurer. So I'm working with numbers all the time. I would like to be the assessor because I want to keep our office the same fair, friendly, professional office that it currently is. And that's why I want to be the assessor.
Great, thank you. Deb? Deb and Mick, thank you very much for joining us tonight on our first night of Squirm Night. We will continue our Squirm Night programming next Thursday, October 18th. We will feature the candidates for the Pitkin County and Eagle County Commissioner races. A note that the replays of Squirm Night from tonight will be available on all of the Aspen media social sites, so Aspen Times, Aspen Daily News, Aspen Public Radio, Grassroots TV, and also it'll be available on the Grassroots TV YouTube pages.
Also, the ballots will be mailed out starting on Monday, the week of October 15th, and early voting will start at the new Pitkin County building on October 22nd, and Election Day is November 6th. I'm Curtis Wackerly with Aspen Daily News for David Krause of the Aspen Times and our friends at Grassroots and Aspen Public Radio. Thank you very much for joining us on the first Squirm Night.
Thank you.